Well, that's the word from the overground. But what about the word from the underground?
The creation of house and techno music in the US stirred up so much overseas by the time it got played on pirate radio stations that it was impossible for people over there to not contribute to this musical movement happening. In the UK, two things occurred that will forever have changed electronic music as we know it. One being the establishment of raves, and the other, breakbeat music. Breakbeats are cool because they are samples that come from disco and jazz and soul records from the 70s and 60s and whatnot. The technique was already being used by hip-hop producers to make their beats. Electronic music producers figured out how to use those same strategies to apply them to their own creations. Breakbeat is kind of the mother genre and the precursor to a lot of other similar sounding genres like jungle and two-step garage and whatnot. I feel like this is a cool opportunity to explore how to make that kind of breakbeat, ravey sound from the 90s, or at least attempt to. Without further ado, just kind of sit back and enjoy the cookup, and maybe you'll learn a thing or two. And if you're curious on the full final track, you can just go listen to it on my Bandcamp channel. All right, welcome to the project file. I made this track in 139 BPM. That's a pretty good starting tempo to deal with breakbeats. I'm doing all this inside Ableton, so right off the bat, it's going to eliminate the potential for that 90s feel. I'm more so trying to replicate what I hear in a DAW. It's important to have a good mastering chain that's going to make your beat or instrumental pop at the end. You have to have a clean mix, and you have to have headroom in order to do so. If you use Ableton and you haven't explored a mastering chain yet, just email me and I can send you a good stock mastering chain. Then you can play around with that and it'll help you understand the whole concept.
Your name's not Dan, not tonight.
I'm going to show you all the layers in the way that I added them while I was creating this track. When listening to the reference track that I was using for this, the bass pattern was what stood out to me the most. It was a very rolling pattern. It was tumbly. It was energetic. As you heard, I set out to replicate that. And in order to make it sound more 90s-ish, I had to actually downgrade the quality of everything with the help of the redux effect and this erosion effect. Both of those kind of make it sound fizzy and crunchy a little bit, digital. I have two different sub basses and they're both playing different patterns and they kind of bounce off each other. And I've turned the bass frequencies mono with the utility effect. All I was going for was that groove that I was just talking about, and I got there pretty quickly because those were really short loops. Next, I was ready to chop up a drum break, and that's the whole point of this whole genre. Just like the reference track, I wanted a drum pattern that wasn't looping non-stop seamlessly. It was kind of like a start and stop. It was obviously being chopped and manipulated. It was sampled. So with my pattern, I tried to achieve that as well. Effects processing is pretty light on the drum break channel itself, but I am sending it to an 1176 compressor for a little bit of parallel compression, just for loudness, I think, in my opinion, but also I'm sending it to boombox drums, which is that stock effect, which always just beefs up the drums in a clean way. Next, to fill that little space in the break, the last little part of the loop, I added another little section of another drum break, and I almost play it like a sample. I mean, they're all samples. You know what I mean. Yeah, so this little thing came from another breakbeat. This is what it was sounding like, and The effects processing was light for it. I just did a little bit of reduction of the quality with that redux effect. And a little EQ rolling off some low end because it was a pretty bassy sample. That's without it. And with it, it's pretty subtle. If you need breakbeat samples themselves, check out rhythmlab.com. You can get free breakbeats. They're not all like super great. Some are more hip-hoppy, but you know, check it out. All right, so this is the next sound. It's this rave lead. I guess so. Real complicated idea you guys see there. But that drum rhythm is so complex that we needed a little bit of simplicity to glue it all together. I don't think I did any mixing at all to that channel. The next sound is super subtle, and I think it just adds a funny little layer. I hide it in the track really low in volume, but it's just like me triggering the sample in instrument rack on the keyboard. And then I added a delay effect on top of it just to, I don't know, give it a little weirdness. It sounds totally ridiculous, actually. I don't really know. I put it really low in volume and it kind of sounds textural. I have this second bass here. I originally added it because I was going to use it for a bridge section, which I did. You'll hear it later on, but this section is more so meant to double up with the other basses after that bridge section. Which brings me to this secondary drum loop. It's just kind of chill in there. It had more of like a high-end, like hi-hat kind of thing going on rather than like kick and snare. At least in the context of putting it with the rest of the elements. I forgot to talk about the effects rack for the drums. That's with it off and with it on. That phaser effect is doing a lot of the work, and so is the drum bus. A little experimental thing was adding a reverb with a small decay time, and you also turn that dry-wet ratio most of the way up, and doing that will make whatever you put that on sound like it's in a room. Okay, back to that bass. Effect processing was this cabinet. If you haven't messed with this cabinet effect yet, try messing around with it. It's kind of stupid, but it adds a nice, I don't know, anytime anything's too bright, pop that on. I did a little EQing on it, and I also turned the bass frequencies mono so it wouldn't clash with the rest of the mix, ultimately just trying to get a cleaner mix. This is that bridge section bass that I was talking about, and I'm borrowing this idea directly from the reference track.
Not tonight. You're not on the list.
You might have seen me not touch on a couple of those channels, but that's because everything there was added after the arrangement process, which for me is just playing around with a series of loops until I like kind of the formation of it all.
Well, that's the word from the overground. But what about the word from the underground?
Just like the reference track, I wanted to use a vocal sample chop to give my track a little more identity. As I was looking around for archive footage of electronic music and whatnot of the rave era for my intro, I came across this Kiss FM Radical Radio sample. And it was just a perfect little snippet that I could use.
Well, that's the word from the...
I could have used the audio how it was when I found it, but I decided to do a little sound design to it because why not? I wanted the audio to sound spaced out and inebriated.
But what about the word? Well, that's the word from the...
You can't go wrong with a little bit of echo delay. You can always get that sound real easily with that, and a little bit of reverb too. Alright, so the next thing I did was opened up Instrument Rack and dragged the same exact sample into it, and I was just chopping the words individually, so I could just trigger them one at a time if I wanted to.
What about the word from the underground?
That was simple. But what wasn't so simple was achieving this reversed, washed out drum effect, and I'm going to teach you how I did that so you don't have to feel lost when trying to replicate that. For me now it's simple, but it's something that like I used to overlook because I thought it might be like too much effort. It works really well with vocals too. You can wash them out with reverb and then reverse them. Whatever you want to reverse and wash out with reverb, you would put that reverb on that channel directly. And then you're going to send the audio from that channel to a new audio channel and record that audio onto that audio channel. From there, then you can reverse that new audio. And you don't need that reverb on that other channel anymore. You can just get rid of it. Yeah, just like that. And you can hit the R button and it'll just reverse it for you. You can see I used that reverse drum thing a couple times in the track.
But what about the word from the underground?
Looking around at automations here, things were pretty simple. The stuff here that looks complicated is the reverb, which I was just manually doing by hand on the reverb effect while recording it. That's the only reason why it looks so crazy. And specifically what that was reverb making the drums sound like they were in the room versus coming back and sounding like they were right in your face. I had to do some volume automations specifically to cut off the ends of things abruptly, because sometimes in Ableton, the sound will keep going after it looks like it's supposed to end. Hence why you really got to use your ears first while making music. It's not a visual thing at all. Wow, this was hiding on me. This is a thing I forgot to mention. It's just a little bit of the vocal sample on another channel. So I have 3 channels of this vocal sample. On that one that you just heard, it was washed out severely by echo, acting only as a transitional moment. All right, and here's the mastering chain.
What about the word from the...
I'm learning about mastering every year, so this is as far as I can get you right now, but I'm probably doing it wrong according to mastering engineers. All right, in order, we got Master MIDI right here. I don't even realize what these names are when I'm working on the music. And then I got Pultec EQ going into utility, going into an LA2A compressor, doing really light compression on the master. After that, it goes into 2 limiters. That first limiter is going to balance things out, and that second limiter is going to make the mix reach for the stars and add back a lot of volume. If you found this track interesting and enjoyed watching me make it, feel free to leave a comment, like this video, and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. I'm curious to see what you'd like to see me make next, so let me know. I'm working on a Patreon account so I can share these project files with everybody, and in the meantime, feel free to check out my Bandcamp so you can hear this track in its entirety.